So look, this video is for the One Punch Man fans mainly, but it's really for anybody who thinks Goku's clash with Beerus doesn't scale Goku's AP. This is like the hottest topic all over my For You page right now, right? And pretty much is, does Goku clash with Beerus scales to Goku's AP? And my answer to that is not directly. It doesn't directly scale Goku's AP, but I feel like it does scale Goku's AP, right? Now, a lot of One Punch Man fans like to use this on Goku. The reason why they don't think it scales is because the shockwaves got stronger the further they traveled. The same shockwaves that were going to destroy the universe, it was going to destroy the universe because it got stronger over a period of distance that got traveled, right? And that's abnormal behavior for a shockwave, right? Because in real physics, a shockwave normally dissipates with distance. But this shockwave got stronger. And if you know anything about shockwaves, you would know that a shockwave works by basically transcending the sound of the local medium, which is, mediums are like air, water, solids, etc. So pretty much when you build enough pressure, when you build enough speed and pressure, and that pressure gets to a point where it's moving faster than the sound barrier, you get a sonic boom, right? Hence, a sonic boom is just a shockwave. But how that works is you're building enough pressure, you're building enough rapid pressure, and it's traveling so fast that the sound barrier can't contain it no more. So you get a boom. Same goes with trying to make a sonic boom in water, right? Since water is a denser medium, right? Breaking the sound barrier in water would be a lot more difficult than doing it in air, right? Since water is denser and it's thicker, so you would have to produce speeds of, like, if I'm correct, like 1,500 kilometers. You would have to go about that fast to break basically the sound barrier in water, and then you would get a sonic boom in water. All right, so let's get into why I low-key think that Goku does scale to the universal clash with him and Beerus. Exhibit A. Now, what you just watched was the first clash that Goku and Beerus did, and it created the shockwave, right? So I want you to take note that these shockwaves are only happening because they're clashing. So we can all agree that the shockwaves are originating from Goku and Beerus clashing.
What's going on here? Their impacts are creating energy shockwaves.
You hear that? Elder Kai said their impacts are creating energy shockwave. This is both the narrative, the story, and Elder Kai telling you that the impact of their fists colliding with each other is generating shockwaves. Keywords, the impact, which is another way of just saying Goku and Beerus' strength are just colliding with each other, causing these shockwaves. Another example of why I say they're the cause of these shockwaves.
And these waves gain strength the farther they travel.
So here we have Elder Kai saying the waves gain strength the further they travel, implying that the shockwaves are growing the further they travel, right? So these shockwaves that are getting stronger with distance is a byproduct of Goku and Beerus clashing. So pretty much there's a chain reaction going on, right? Because Beerus and Goku are the cause of these shockwaves. Their strength is what's making the shockwave, and the byproduct of the shockwaves is that they are getting stronger with distance. But we know in real physics, a shockwave in normal air usually dissipates with distance, right? But Elder Kai just said that these shockwaves are growing the further they travel, which is abnormal behavior for a shockwave. So we know that this isn't a normal shockwave. But we do know that it's a key space-time disturbance spreading through the universe. So the only explanation for this abnormal behavior for a shockwave, it would be because the medium is abnormal. The whole universe is in an atmosphere. And since the shockwave traveled through the universe, then the universe is most likely the reason why the shockwaves were behaving the way they were, since the universe isn't an atmosphere. Because we know that in air, in an atmosphere, a shockwave usually dissipates with distance.
It worked! What the? Tremendous accomplishment. His skills are off the charts.
So what happened? Where is the shockwave?
By slamming his fist into beerus's with just the right angle and force, he neutralized the attack and canceled out its energy.
Here we have Elder Kai saying that Goku was able to neutralize the shockwaves because he was able to angle and use the right amount of force output to neutralize it. So Goku pretty much he applied enough force and he angled it just right to the where it neutralized the shockwave. Another reason why these shockwaves aren't acting independently of Goku and Beerus. And I also want you to take notice how the narrative is treating Goku and Beerus as the threats here. No one is scared of the shockwaves. They're more scared of Goku and Beerus fighting. They even went so far as to warn Goku and Beerus to stop fighting, because Goku and Beerus's power was causing a universal ending chain effect, which would speak a lot about their power, right? So in conclusion, right, the whole clash and the shockwaves being stated to destroy the universe is all one big chain effect. If I have a snowball, right, for example, if I have a snowball and I roll it down Mount Everest and then that snowball becomes an avalanche, do me pushing the snowball or do me rolling the snowball on the ground scale me to mountain level? No, right? But you still scale to the push to the fact that it could trigger an avalanche. Of course, you don't scale to the entire avalanche mass because you didn't do it directly. It was cause and effect that did it. But the fact that your hand can trigger such a catastrophic event, you would still be partly scaled to that, if you get what I'm trying to say. So what I'm trying to say is Goku doesn't automatically scale to the peak wave magnitude. That's fair. I can say that. But he still scales to producing a clash that can start a universal destroying chain effect. And later he learns to control that effect. So you don't have to claim Goku's fist equals full end universe wave energy at max distance to still get universal class AP in the sense power scalers use it. So Goku doesn't directly scales to the shockwave's final strength after it grows, but Goku and Beerus are outputting power that, if left uncontrolled, produces universe-threatening effects. Again, that's why Elder Kai had to warn them to stop. Now, I know some people out there are going to be like, dude, that's a poor analogy, because when you roll a snowball down Mount Everest and it becomes an avalanche, that's gravity plus the mass of the mountain doing the work. You're not supplying that destructive energy yourself. And my answer to that is, you're right. But in that episode where Goku and Beerus clash, the shock waves come from their clash. Goku and Beerus' fists are the snowballs. Them clashing is what is creating these shockwaves. If the energy of the shockwave didn't come from Goku and Beerus, then there wouldn't have been no shockwave. The wave is a direct extension of their power. So what did we learn? We do learn that Goku doesn't directly scale to the clash feat between him and Beerus, but we do know that if Goku's power is left unchecked, could cause a universal ending chain effect. Or in other words, Goku's power is the trigger force that can cause a universal level ending chain effect. Now, another question may arise. If Goku and Beerus are the trigger, why is he still universal level AP, right? And that's because trigger doesn't mean weak by default. What matters is the threshold his power crosses. There are two kinds of triggers, right? Weak triggers, aka the avalanche example, because if you roll a snowball down Mount Everest, the snow is already unstable. Any small push works, and the energy comes from environment. So that would scale you low, right? Because you have all these fragile things that's causing this disaster level threat to happen, right? And then you have what I call high threshold triggers, which would be Goku's case, right? Because you need extreme power to start it. And there's no evidence the universe was unstable when Goku and Beerus clashed. And only God tier punches cause this. So that would scale you high, right? So now that begs the question, can any normal character trigger it? And the answer is no. Only Beerus level power triggered this event. That means the minimum required energy to trigger it is already absurdly high. When it comes to power scaling uses, can your output cause universal destruction? Not, did you personally erase the universe in one punch? So if your power initiates a universe destroying chain reaction and it only happens at your power level, you are in the universal AP class. Even if the destruction is gradual, propagated, or amplified, you're still in that tier. And Elder Kai confirms this by saying, if this continues, the universe will be destroyed, meaning the ongoing punches are crossing the danger threshold, not some random background effect. So Goku isn't just flicking a switch. He's consistently outputting universe endangering power. So to wrap it all up, right? Goku isn't some lucky guy who just so happily poke the system. He's the guy that broke the system, in other words, is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense to you. So Goku is in the universal AP because his power is the cause. The threshold required is God tier. The result threatens the entire universe. It stops when he controls his output. So he's not just a trigger. He's a trigger that requires universal class power to pull.